This is my journey towards multilingualism. First, a primary factor in my learning French process is the opportunity to assist to a French school with teachers from France. In this way, from an early age, I was immersed in a bilingual community, having French teachers and some Ecuadorians within the institutions. So, throughout the day, I had to speak both languages. Tokuhama Espinosa explains that in relation to the moment in which a second language is learned, there are windows of opportunity, which represent moments in which certain skills can be learned better. There are 3 windows of opportunity for the acquisition of a second language. I relate my learning French process to the second window of opportunity. The second window of opportunity typically occurs between 4 and 8 years old, and is based mainly on the self-confidence you have at that age when facing a foreign language. You face it with joy, curiosity, fun, emotion, and without fear of making mistakes. In comparison to English and French, languages that I learned while being in my third window of opportunity, which is characterized by how learning is experienced in relation to social pressure and personality, plays an essential role. Considering myself a more introverted person, this was a disadvantage in the development of speaking skills when learning English and Portuguese, as I was embarrassed to make mistakes in front of my classmates. Another important factor in learning French is the possibility of speaking French with my older sister at first and later with my younger sister. Thus, the games were developing French and Spanish at home. According to Tokuhama Espinosa, siblings learn a great deal from one another because having siblings increase the number of verbal exchanges and conversations a child has in a day. On the other hand, Gardner, Musgrave, and Tremblay mentioned that family support indicate that early social cultural experience influenced their current cultural attitudes, motivation to learn a second language, and self-perceptions of second language proficiency. Thus, another fundamental factor in my learning French process was the support received by my family, by allowing me to travel to France to practice, improve the language, and learn more about the culture. In relation to my English process, a fundamental factor was having the opportunity to have English classes at school. However, this advantageously went hand in hand with a positive and intrinsic motivation. I remember that around the age of 10, when I started to learn English, I liked many American singers. Thus, I felt motivated to learn English in order to understand the lyrics of the songs that I liked so much without having to translate them on the internet, which I used to do. Engine mentions that having positive motivations will be helpful to the students in acquiring new information and decrease the effects of negative motivations which can interfere with the student's second language acquisition. However, this motivation ended by achieving my goal, which was to understand songs in English. Therefore, some skills such as writing or speaking did not develop so much. However, at the end of school, I had the opportunity to do a year of exchange in England, which allowed a positive and intrinsic motivation towards English appeared again in me. Tokuhama Espinosa mentions that the most effective combination turns out to be intrinsic and positive motivation. Likewise, Mejia explains that in many cases, developing a competition that allows someone to function socially allows for greater openness to learn a new language. Living with people from several countries and only having English as a common language motivated me to improve my speaking skills. In relation to my Portuguese learning process, it started when I was 16 years old. First, I had the opportunity to take classes at my school as an extracurricular with a Brazilian teacher. Therefore, I consider that the educational opportunity was an important factor since if this opportunity had not been presented so close and accessible, I will probably never have taken Portuguese classes on my own. A very important factor was the teaching methodologies of my Portuguese teacher. The classes were so much fun. We played games in the class, we watched movies, and listened to Brazilian songs. This allowed learning to be fun. Thus, Louis and she proposed that language teaching should be organized in such a way as not to demand great intellectual feats of abstract reasoning to learn a language, but should be carried out naturally. On the other hand, the typology of Spanish and Portuguese was a favorable factor for my learning process. Tokuhama Espinosa mentions that languages that share historical roots are easier to learn than those that don't have these commonalities. In this case, both Spanish and Portuguese are derived from Latin. Finally, when I went to England, I was living in a house with several volunteers from the program, the vast majority of whom were from Brazil. So I was immersed in the language in a bilingual community based on English and Portuguese.